2 years after his father's funeral, Mark received a letter. The postmark was recent, but the signature achingly familiar. "You don't have to forgive me. Just go to the coordinates. There, you'll find what changes everything." The father's last wish? He nearly didn't open it. The envelope had no return address, thick and impersonal, the name on the front printed in typewriter script, M. Becker. Nothing personal, no "to my son," or even "to Mark." Just a surname, as if it were a business notice or a debt collection. He tucked it into a drawer, then took it out. Twice he threw it into the bin, and twice pulled it back out again. He opened it only at night under the yellow kitchen lamp, without turning on the overhead light. He didn't know why. There was no explanation inside, only a set of coordinates, handwritten on a yellowed scrap of paper, and a single phrase. "You won't stop searching anyway, so search where I hid myself." He didn't understand what it meant. His father had died 2 years ago. Heart attack, one night, no chance. The funeral had been closed, casket, the doctor's insistence. At the time, it seemed natural. Why see a body if you didn't want to remember death? Now that decision seemed eerily convenient. Mark typed in the coordinates. North of Innsbruck, nearly in the Alps. An abandoned village demolished back in the 70s after an avalanche. There was nothing to look for there. He figured it was a joke, a prank by one of his father's old friends, a deluded relative, a troll. But everything about the letter, the paper, the smell, even the pressure of the pen at the ends of the letters, reminded him of those short notes his father used to leave on the fridge. "Back late, stay home, don't answer unknown numbers." He didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in remnants. A person doesn't disappear. He just remains, somewhere he's no longer being looked for. And then, the photo, his mother, very young, standing by a pond. He had never seen this photo before. Why hadn't she shown it to him? Or did she not want him to know where it came from? Still, he didn't leave right away. First came the sensation of emptiness, pulling at him from inside like a vacuum behind a sealed door. If you don't open it, it will crush the walls from within. He caught himself standing by the window, keys already in hand. A week later, the emptiness became unbearable, and he left. He pulled over when the GPS said, "You have arrived." No one had cleared these roads in years. Dry pine needles blanketed the gravel like dust in a house where no one had lived for decades. The branches of the pines bent over the trail as if shielding it from unwanted eyes. Below lay a glade, the remnants of a village now marked only on old cartographic layers. He walked slowly, as if the sound of his footsteps might disturb the silence itself. The coordinates led to a rocky outcrop, half buried in loose stones, a place where nothing was supposed to be. He noticed it right away, one stone slightly misaligned, as if placed not by nature, but by hand. He removed his gloves and began to clear the area, slowly at first, then faster, as if afraid he might lose the will to go on. Beneath the rocks was a box, metal, rusted at the edges, with a lock that no longer held. It opened with a creak, like breath after years of silence. Inside was a voice recorder. The tape looked new. Next to it lay a photograph, old, black and white. His mother, young, smiling, by a pond. He had never seen this photo before. On the back, a handwritten note. "What you're about to learn won't make me better, but maybe it will make me clearer." He pressed play. Static, a pause, and then a voice. Dry, tired, unmistakable. "If you're listening to this, then I'm already gone. Or at least I hope I am, because if I'm still alive, then everything went wrong." Mark froze. The voice continued, calm, unpretentious, like a conversation between old acquaintances. No words of love, no apologies, only a strange phrase at the end of the recording. "I hid myself 3 times. This is the first place. If you want to understand, keep looking." Keep looking? He didn't yet know what he was unearthing. Not a secret, not a father. More likely, whatever was left of both. That night, he didn't drive away right away. He sat in the car playing the tape over and over, as the darkness outside closed in like a tightening sock. With every replay, the voice grew quieter and the silence louder. By dawn, when the first birds pulled a trembling note from the sky, he turned the ignition. Without letting the engine warm, he pulled away slowly. The car was cold, but he didn't turn on the heater. The recording played on loop, and each pause between the words felt longer than the words themselves. His father spoke in fragments. No chronology, no attempt to explain it all at once. As if he knew the listener would no longer be a child, someone who could piece it together himself. I worked for those you should never serve, not because I wanted to, but because I was young, stupid, and believed that debts were temporary. And then I became a father. Too early and too late at the same time. Mark stopped the tape. He didn't remember anything dangerous about his father, just the smell of tobacco, coffee that was always too strong, and a strange habit of checking the locks twice. Everything that once seemed like quirks now looked like traces. He recalled the time his father suddenly pulled over on the highway, as if he'd seen someone in the mirror, but said nothing. He remembered how one day he burned all the old photo albums, calling it a spring cleaning. He remembered the phrase he used to say, "It's better not to know than to regret that you do." And then, his mother, quiet, watchful. She had closed the window that day so the smoke wouldn't drift inside, and said only one thing to him. "Some stories are better heard with your back turned." Only now did he understand what she meant. There were other details, subtle but persistent. Like that time she burned letters without even opening them. Back then, he thought they were bills. Now he wasn't so sure. Her face whenever someone mentioned his father's work. A smile, stretched, as if something alive was struggling underneath. He didn't want to believe the recordings, but the voice on the tape wasn't confessing. It was bequeathing. Not an inheritance, but a memory. In the second half of the tape, his father mentioned a name. Gunther R., a man Mark had never heard of, but the name carried a strange weight, as if it contained a burden no letters could convey. He holds threads like cobwebs, not lives. He stores faces in the basement of memory and erases them like pencil marks. Then, not from the recorder, but from memory, he remembered his mother once listening to the radio, a broadcast about some investigation. The announcer said, "Operation led by Gunther R." And she turned off the radio instantly, mid-sentence. He'd thought it was nothing. Now he wasn't so sure. His father had added, "Gunther R. wasn't just a creditor. His name appeared in archives people don't read aloud. An acquaintance once called him the kind of man from whom not only people disappear, but their traces too." And then the phrase repeated twice, "If he finds out you're my son, your only option will be to run." Mark switched off the recorder and sat in silence. Suddenly, he realized he didn't know why he was still doing this. He told himself he wanted the truth, but didn't he already know enough? Or was this just an attempt to stay someone's son? He suddenly felt how fragile that role was, as if everything he'd done in the past 2 days wasn't really his decision, but a habit. Being a son, chasing traces, walking a path laid by someone else's footsteps. But who was he without that? He looked into the mirror and for the first time in years, didn't just see a face. He saw a blank space waiting to be named, not a role, but a possibility. And that frightened him more than all his father's secrets. He was beginning to suspect everything he knew about his family had been chosen for him. Now he had to choose for himself, whether to keep knowing, and who to be when the story you grew up in stops being yours. He found the address attached to the recorder, a scrap cut from an old atlas. Next to it, another set of coordinates and a name, Hans Reuter, in a stiff, unfamiliar hand. The house was in Austria, in a small town near the German border. Neither GPS nor online maps recognized the street. It had vanished after the municipal merger in 1994. But Mark found it, using an old satellite photo where the roofs were still brown and the streets had names instead of numbers. The house was abandoned, but not in ruins. Neat as if its owner had simply gone on a long trip. The door was unlocked. Inside, no photos, no documents, no signs of real life. Just a carefully made bed, coverless books, and a hat left hanging near the door. He didn't know what he was looking for until he found the upstairs room. It smelled of damp paper. On the wall, an old map covered in the circles and arrows, crisscrossed with threads. In the center, a name, M. Becker. Son, each thread, a year. Each dot, a place. School, university, his old Berlin apartment, even a hostel he'd stayed in for just 3 nights. Someone had tracked his life, carefully, almost reverently. On the desk, a stack of letters, all addressed to him, all unsent. The ink had faded, but the dates were recent. The last letter was dated just 3 weeks before his father's official death. I watched you across kilometers and years. I didn't interfere, because once interference made me into something monstrous. Mark sat on the edge of the bed. The room was empty, but he could feel it. Someone had lived here, breathed here, written here, with hope that they'd be understood, even without being met. It was a life under another name, but not a lie. Perhaps it was the only truth his father had ever been able to afford. He found the key at the bottom of a drawer, taped to the back of an envelope. It wasn't a door key, too small, with a triangular cut, as if it was meant for something specific. Alongside it, there was another note. What changes everything is not in the answers, but in what you choose to do with them. Below it, one last set of coordinates, just a few kilometers from the house. A mountaintop cemetery, half forgotten, unnamed. Behind the stone wall, where gravestones had sunken into the earth like roots, he found a sealed niche with a faded plaque. Zimmer, 17. Room 17. He inserted the key. Inside, a box. Metal like the first one, but heavier. He opened it cautiously, as if afraid it would be empty. It wasn't. Inside lay an urn. No name, no dates, just a ribbon with a single word. Becker, and a passport, issued to Hans Reuter. The photo showed his father already gray-haired, with tired eyes, the face of a man who had lived someone else's life for far too long. At the bottom of the box, a letter, the last one. If you're reading this, it means I made it. I didn't ask for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I never wanted to be forgiven. I only wanted to be forgotten, but not by you. By you. I wanted to be understood. Mark sat down on the cold stone. What he had found was not an explanation, not an excuse. It was a choice, not his father's, his own. In front of him was a man who had turned disappearance into a form of care, who vanished not to save himself, but to prevent harm. What changed everything wasn't in the box. It was what he would now do with it. When night fell, he placed the urn on the passenger seat, buckled it in like a living person, and slowly drove down the serpentine road. The headlights cut through the fog, revealing turns they had once taken together. His father at the wheel, him in the back seat, both silent, listening to the engine fill the pauses. Now the engine hummed the same, but the pauses felt endless, and he didn't know which was worse, the sound of the motor or his own breathing. He spent the night in the car. The rain didn't stop, light, persistent, as if the air itself were trying to wash something away. The urn sat beside him, wrapped in his jacket. Light from a lone lamppost flickered across its metal surface. It looked as if someone inside were slowly turning. To burn it? To bury it? To take it home? Every option felt like betrayal, and inaction, like cowardice. At dawn, he returned to the cemetery. The empty niche next to the first was unlocked. Inside, wilted flowers and a nameplate, nearly erased. Hicker. He lifted the urn, ready to place it inside. He bent forward but froze. What if he was wrong? What if his father's last wish was to vanish truly entirely, without trace? And now the son, unable to bear that, was about to give him a gravestone, a place to visit? Then a thought pierced him. What if it wasn't about disappearance at all? What if it was about closure? What if his father wanted to be buried, wanted an ending, not an ellipsis? Maybe the key wasn't an invitation to choose, but a clear instruction. Close, finish, let go. Fear rose in him, not of mistake, but of responsibility. Because if he chose not to seal the niche, he would be imposing his own understanding. And if he sealed it, maybe he'd erase the one form of care his father had fought to preserve. Every movement was an act of intrusion. He sat down on the stone, the same one where he'd read the last letter. The first note slipped from his coat pocket. "You won't stop searching anyway, so search where I hid myself." He looked at the urn. The word Becker on the ribbon no longer felt like a name, more like a final thread, and he didn't know whether to sever it or release it. He nearly closed the niche. Almost. But something stopped him. Not certainty, doubt. What if he'd misunderstood everything? What if his father wanted peace, not emptiness? He remained standing inside that what if for a long time, and then, behind him, a faint crunch. Someone laid a stone, one gently with a soft thud, as if filling a void. He didn't turn around. He stood, placed the urn inside the niche, but didn't shut the door. Left it all as it was. No marker, no ending. Neither forgotten nor identified. He didn't cross the border. And in that, maybe he fulfilled the request, or broke it. He could no longer be sure. Sometimes love means not proving, not fixing, not explaining. Sometimes it means simply not touching what someone wanted to take with them. He wrote it slowly. At first, he meant to keep it short. One line, something like, "I'm not angry," or "I understand." Then he tried to explain, justify, ask questions. Page after page tore, crumpled, piled up in the corner. Eventually, he just began speaking aloud, as he once had in childhood, in the room where his father was supposedly asleep, always listening. He chose the old paper, the one he'd found in the house under the false name. The ink spread, as if it too wanted to disappear. "You chose disappearance as a form of care, and I still don't know if that was right, but I understood this. You didn't want me to carry your mistakes. You didn't ask for forgiveness, and maybe that's why I gave it to you." He signed it simply, Mark, no surname. His handwriting came out different, steady, slightly slanted, just like his father's. He didn't put it in an envelope. He stepped outside. The sky was gray, but not grim. The kind of sky you get on days when anything could still change, but hasn't yet. He lit the letter. The flame was quiet. The paper shriveled, darkened, vanished slowly, almost unwilling to leave while he still watched. He didn't look away. He wasn't burying his father again. He wasn't saying goodbye. He was simply letting him remain, gone. When the fire died, he brushed the ash from his palm. And for the first time in years, he thought of the future, not as an escape, but as a blank page. No inheritance, no debt, and it felt lighter than he expected. Sometimes the letter you never send is the truest one of all.